Is your next cosplay or costume needing some pleats? Maybe it's a school skirt, or a detail on a hem or a cuff, or maybe even a historical gown. Then here's some techniques for you to use. Box pleat and inverted box pleat. Box pleats are commonly found on skirts and as a decorative trim, and single inverted box pleats are sometimes found as kick pleats in skirts. To construct them, you'll be creating a fold in the fabric going in one direction, and then a fold of the same size going in the opposite direction, ideally with the edges of the fold touching each other. Pin these pleats in. I personally like to sew at this point. I sew the pleats down within the seam allowance at the top, and then iron the pleats flat. Next is knife pleats. Knife pleats are often found in school skirts and other skirts, as well as decorative trim as well. Knife pleats are where you fold the fabric all going in one direction. The fold back of the knife pleats don't have to be in line with the previous fold, but they can be if you want them to be. They can also be as wide or as narrow as you like. Mine here are approximately 2 centimeters wide. Once again, I sew the pleats down within the seam allowance and then iron. However, with any of the first 5 examples I'm showing today, if you want some extra crispness, try some spray starch as you iron. It makes them super sharp and holds their shape wonderfully. Now onto accordion pleats. This is a variation of knife pleats and is often used in skirts, decorative trims, and also in blouses and bodices. To make an accordion pleat, you fold the fabric on itself all going the same way. However, accordion pleats are very narrow, usually 1 centimeter or less. The back folds also match up with the previous front folds so that there are no gaps. Another way that accordion pleats are made is by being wedged into cardboard folded in an accordion manner and then heated and pressed. In my sample, once again I sew down the pleats and then press it with an iron. Mixing pleats. I've come to the conclusion that pleating can be a bit of an art form, and you can play around with it a bit to add some flair to your project. In this sample, I'm doing a 2 centimeter knife pleat. Then I'm doing a second matching knife pleat directly on top of that. Next to that knife pleat, I'm doing another knife pleat but going in the opposite way, which makes a box pleat. Then under that pleat, I do another knife pleat. This makes for one super full pleat. I sew it down and iron it. And when I turn it over, you can see the inverted box pleat is at the back with some extra pleats on top. How cool would that be in a skirt? Top stitch pleats. Top stitching pleats for a portion of the pleat is sometimes found on skirts, usually to reduce the puffiness over the hips and to give a little bit more of a fitted silhouette. Here I am pinning a single box pleat and knife pleat to demonstrate. I sew within the seam allowance and iron as I have done with the previous samples. Next, with a very narrow allowance, I sew along the knife pleat to the point I wish it to start flaring out from. For the box pleat, I've chosen to use the inverted box pleat side. I sew it down with a narrow allowance, sew across to the other pleat, and then sew back up to my original line of stitching. This neatly locks the pleats in place. Cartridge pleats. Cartridge pleats are constructed a bit differently to the other pleating techniques I have shown so far. They are commonly used in historical gowns, in the skirts and in the sleeves. They have fallen out of fashion for common use as they are manually intensive to make. But hey, that sounds like us cosplayers, right? There are a number of ways to make cartridge pleats, but this is how I make mine. Attach a strip of felt or wool to the top of your fabric and sew that in with about a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Then flip the fabric and hide the raw edges to create a hem. Press with an iron. Cartridge pleats tend to be around 1/2 inch to 1 inch wide. Since I'm using a small sample, I've opted to use 1/2 inch. I mark this out on the felt. With a needle and thread, I recommend using strong thread or even embroidery floss, I weave my way through the fabric at the 1/2 inch marks. Then I grab a second needle and thread and do the exact same weave about 1 centimeter or so down from the first row of stitching. I then pull my threads tight. I use my fingers to move and manipulate the pleats around before tying off the thread. This will then be sewn directly onto the waistband or into the bodice of the gown by hand. And there you go, 6 different techniques for you to play around with in your next project. If you've liked this tutorial, please give me a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more cosplay related videos.